There are acts and movements in the way that people move their agenda and try to understand and look for clarification. There are all and that stuff can be as interesting as people running through the street showing their badges
cars or whatever they have to do.
Yeah.
David Fincher loves subtleties. People may not find conversations innately cinematic, but the driving force behind Mindhunter, like Zodiac, are words. Interviews, interrogations, discussions between investigators are all dominated by dialogue, but Fincher avoids the pitfalls of exposition whenever he's behind the camera. Characters ingest new information, and we can see the shift in interpersonal dynamics between themselves. It's Fincher's compositions that elevate a scene by revealing subtext through precise framing, which engages the audience in the drama of what's not being said. The visual literacy at play here subconsciously help us relate to the world our protagonists are in, and by seeing how he frames a simple, introductory conversation, Fincher underlines the killer's words through various camera positions to brew something innately sinister.
They're weaker than men, so they learn strategies. They deploy their minds and their sex, and they intuitively learn to humiliate.
I want to focus on Ed Kemper, the seemingly captivating giant that provides the groundwork for Ford and Tench. David Fincher directed the second episode, in which Kemper makes his first appearance. The script had to do multiple things. It must carry on the new dynamic between Ford and Tench. It should unravel a new point of interest, in this case a new subject, and finally, there must be an adequate build-up to this said subject. Within the first 5 minutes, the script starts to reveal key details.
6 teenage girls. He chops their heads right off. He has sexual intercourse with the corpses. Kills his mom with a claw hammer. Has sexual intercourse with her head.
Bullshit.
In her mouth.
No.
Yeah.
And we're shown this scene between Ford and Tench.
The guy is 6'9", weighs 300 pounds.
That's right.
So what's he gonna do?
He's gonna take the fucking thing away from you. He's gonna kill you with it, and then he's gonna have sex with your face.
We arrive at the facility, and what Fincher does immediately is strip away Ford's usual authority. His gun is taken away, and is walked down a corridor, flanked by dangerous inmates. It's smart to have these scenes following Ford with the chatter and slurs pervading the sound design, as cutting from this scene straight to the interrogation wouldn't impart that feeling of hostility. We then get our first glimpse of Ed Kemper. Notice how in these similar shots, the shallow depth of focus has 2 different effects. Ford's uneasiness gives an almost tunnel vision effect, while the camera slowly pans up on Kemper to show off his stature. The two are left alone, and we get this great master shot of them, split by a pillar, both obsessives and both on the opposite sides of the law. Before we get to the conversation, it's important to know what the characters' goals are. Ford is certain that information learned from Kemper will give credence to his theories, but he doesn't know how difficult this would be. Kemper is a puzzle. He thinks piquing Holden's interest with his psycho-speak is a game. He wants to keep his cards close to his chest and tell what Holden wants to hear. Their greeting sets the tone for the scene, with Kemper shot from a low angle to show dominance, and Holden from a slightly high angle to make him feel tame and unprotected. As they sit down, the camera pans and is fixated on Kemper's movements. He's the one who's steering the direction of this conversation. He's the one in control. I also like how there's an open section behind Kemper, as if that's the only viable escape option Holden has if things go south. The idea of progression for most audiences come through the screen direction of going left to right. We read from left to right, we measure time from left to right. This also applies to characters. When situated on the left, the characters are moving forward in the right direction, while characters on the right are moving backwards, opposing progress, typically being the enemy. In this scene, however, Fincher manipulates the screen direction so that Kemper is on the left and Ford is on the right. This was done to level the playing field, to make the interrogator the adversary and our subject more easily understandable. An important variable that Fincher always has control over is colour, and how colour is implemented in the set dressing and costumes to reflect the characters' personalities. We see monochromatic colours, from muted blues to dark greys. They represent the uncompromising worldview of Kemper, and it subconsciously makes the audience vigilant and wary of Kemper's actions. We get the typical shot reverse shot pattern throughout, a stylistic rule appropriate when characters are getting to know each other, like a tug of war. Their body positions speak for themselves, as they physically don't associate themselves, as seen with folded arms. Ford begins his pleasantries, surface level talk, with the 2 shot from both angles until this happens.
Nothing, it just seems...
You think they lied to me?
The camera shifts when Kemper gives an awkward remark. We get nearer to his true persona, but not quite. Kemper then reveals where he got his insights from, and we finally get some information into how he thinks.
What kind of trap are you talking about?
The classic is talking too much about the crimes, over interest. You have to remain casual. They tried everything to trick me. I'm too savvy. I don't fucking talk, period.
We get an even closer shift towards a tight, over-the-shoulder medium shot. Note how the back of each other's heads are blurred in the over-the-shoulders, to keep one in the dark and the other in focus, keying us to think about the dramatic relationship between these two men. Fincher maintains this shot on him when Kemper inquires about the nature of this talk.
I don't get to go someplace, do a bunch of tests.
No tests, just right here.
Why?
Kemper grows more curious, possibly for the wrong reasons, and when the conversation reaches a new level of unease.
If you want to, that is. I mean, we don't have to talk about anything at all if you don't want to.
Why are you so tense?
This shot right here perfectly sums up how Ford feels. Kemper fills a third of the frame, literally closing in on Ford's space and choking on what air he has left. Fincher then returns to a wider shot to let Ford and us breathe until the conversation steers into more gritty detail, and we hold on the medium shot to let his words linger.
Physically and mentally, I don't think people realize you need to vent.
Ford then pops a dramatic question, and gives Kemper an open choice.
He was a lot like me.
You don't think you could benefit from psychiatry?
I already did all that in the institution.
We finally get our first single, and it's a medium close-up, which invites us to heighten our focus on the subject in exclusion of the environment. The cuts become slower, stretching the suspense until we hear Kemper's voice.
From your perspective.
Death by torture?
We repeat the medium close-up, and Kemper is placed on the right, leaving empty space on the left. This illustrates his skewed, pessimistic thoughts on what should happen to him, showing that there is some sort of recognition of his self-worth, that even he doesn't see himself fitting into society. Fincher loves to shoot as wide as possible. He lets the surroundings shape the personas, so when he does eventually move in for a close-up, the decrease in distance feels like a gut punch, making this shot all the more disturbingly poignant. After a breather with Tench, we get back to the conversation and immediately see a difference. It feels like they've moved closer to each other, like the foreground and the background of the shot almost exist within the same plane. This effect is lens compression, where the camera is fitted with a lens that has a focal point higher than 100mm, which distorts the space around them. As they've talked for a while now, they've loosened up and built a rapport between themselves, literally drawing themselves closer to each other. The shots of Ford look down on him as Kemper is in control of the conversation, drip feeding Ford mediocre insights that make it seem more important than he actually is. Kemper goes on to say,
An unusual MO. Sure?
Well, I was gonna say signature.
An oeuvre, if you will.
which gives Ford further insight and moves to a medium over the shoulder. The editing in the scene also deserves to be noticed. It's always motivated. The cuts create new emotional information, whether it be Ford's reaction or a slight body movement from Kemper. The edits accentuate the feel and rhythm of the scene. Now it's Ford's turn to move the dialogue along, and notice how the shot cuts to an over-the-shoulder close-up of Kemper when he says,
People that kill in sequence like you did.
Sequence?
Kemper realizes there is worth to the method in his madness, shown with the slight squint of his eye, and that this conversation is proving more fruitful than he imagined. He goes on to tell Ford a damning revelation.
It would be a guess, but I'd say right now, North America, more than 35.
35?
This is where Ford hits the jackpot, where the central goal of the FBI and the show itself comes to fruition, uncovering more sequence killers and their motives. Look how Kemper slouches back with his arms crossed, to say it nonchalantly, indulging in Ford's shock and intimidation. The low ominous score kicks in, as a genuine surprise takes hold of Ford in a final, medium close-up.
What do you want from me?
I have no idea.
Compare this to the self-confidence before he entered the prison. He went in knowing that he can crack a serial killer within minutes, knowing he can gain large amounts of information, but now leaves with more questions than answers. See how Fincher frames the progression of the nearly 8-minute conversation. We can watch without sound and still come away with some feeling of tension and discomfort. The alienating wides, the uncomfortable mediums, and the claustrophobic close-ups make the audience subconsciously intimate with these characters even without context. That's the power of visual storytelling, and that's the meticulous skill of Fincher. The performances also need to be commended, especially Cameron Britton, who's terrifying not for what he does, but what he doesn't do. The silences, the quiet moments, and the stares they exchange make it so nerve-wracking. There are 2 more interactions later in the episode, one taking a friendlier approach, and another arranged like a battle between Tench, Ford, and Kemper. These conversations all differ in terms of the dynamics, where we see interesting positioning and camera placements, but the first meeting between a myth-like figure and an inquisitive amateur provides the best entertainment in my eyes. It's just a delight to have a show come out that takes its serial killer genre tropes and reverses them, by making words the weapons. Mindhunter indulges in this American fascination while also attempting to explain it, but with this comes the grim reality that we cannot truly know someone at all.
How do we get ahead of crazy if we don't know how crazy thinks?